Hi, I'm Dr. Inez Ponce de Leon from Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines. I specialize in science and risk communication. I come from a background in molecular biology and biotechnology. Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines in late 2013. It struck the provinces, and I live in Metro Manila, hundreds of miles north of where it was. I wasn't directly affected, but my research was. We might not have felt the flooding, we might not have felt the rain, but we were one with the provinces in sending out goods and aid. Sorry, are you getting this? The rain is really loud over here. We have a typhoon. It formed just at 8 p.m. Right now in the Philippines, we're in monsoon season. We call this habagat. This is when a large blast of both wind and rain will come in from the Indian Ocean. Any kind of storm that comes into the Philippines drags with it all this rain and wind. When any part of a typhoon starts hitting land, it also starts changing speed. A storm gets to be called a typhoon based on its wind speeds. So once it changes wind speeds, then it gets downgraded to a tropical storm, a tropical depression. Last night it was a tropical depression, but in any case, they've already given it a name. It's locally called Ferdy. The Philippines is especially vulnerable to natural disasters because we are an archipelago of 7,000 plus islands right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and right on the ring of fire. We have volcanoes, typhoons, tornadoes, hailstorms. We also are home to a lot of earthquakes. So we are prone to a lot of natural disasters, and we are prone to climate change by virtue simply of being an archipelago. And because we are an archipelago, our cities are packed more densely. So we are also vulnerable to flooding, vulnerable to any kind of climate change effect that might arise because of urban density or urban sprawl. There was bad science communication during Typhoon Haiyan when the National Weather Service released weather warnings that were not translated to the community level, so that people got a copy-paste generic warning and they tended to ignore it because it didn't apply to their very specific situation. That has since changed. After Haiyan struck, we started instituting the early warning system, where people would get at least 72 hours of lead time so that they could respond to a typhoon. In order to do this, we had to mobilize local governments. That meant the village levels. The barangay is the village level. If a typhoon would come, they'd travel to different parts of their village and warn people living by creek sides or river sides. So it's a very specific warning. If you have people living near mountains, then you'd have landslides, rock slides, mudslides. And if you had people living in low-lying areas or valleys, then you'd have flooding. There are parallels between a health crisis and a natural disaster, such as a typhoon. They both involve people. They involve how people understand that virus and how they understand that storm. This means that policies have to be focused on people, not just information. In the Philippines, there already was warning about the coronavirus epidemic as early as January. Science communication was widespread, but the policymakers were not listening. We had no testing. We had no safeguards in place. We have a Philippine president who insists that gasoline can sanitize face masks. He says all of these weird quasi-scientific statements. These bad science communications can do a lot of damage. Sorry, I think I just need to alert you. My video is, oh boy. Hello? I'm back. This was just a mild tropical depression. You can imagine how much worse it would be if this were a bigger storm. This really drives home the point you need infrastructure and really good risk communication. One major lesson that we can glean from this pandemic is to have science communicators be part of the consultative bodies that policymakers work with when they have to weather a crisis such as this one.
I'm Masataka Watanabe, President of Japanese Association for Science Communication. The main mission of our association is to set up the network between science communicators. When the big earthquake struck Japan, 11 March 2011, we immediately went outside the building and waited over 1 hour. And when we went back to our office, we saw the tsunami video in the news. Public transportation stopped until night, so I had to walk home. The magnitude of the earthquake was 9.1. And everyone was worried about the radioactive contamination caused by the nuclear accident. The main place that had a very severe area was the northern part of Japan, not Tokyo. So we couldn't understand what big earthquake it was. So many people died of tsunami. Japan has many earthquakes because of fault line, and climate change has made typhoon bigger than ever. In case of an earthquake, unlike a typhoon, it cannot be predicted. There is a smartphone earthquake warning system now. We can prepare for a big earthquake in the distance, minutes before, but it's probably useless in near-field earthquake. After the big earthquake and Fukusima incident, we started to discuss what we could do. Some people hold the science cafe about the tsunami and radiation effects. Before the cafe, science was thought of as a high-threshold topic. But these events are now thought of as ones where everyone can easily participate, that entails chatting while enjoying a drink. Science Agora was the biggest science communication forum in Japan. I was the director of the Science Agora. The Science Agora conducted several sessions to discuss recovery of the tsunami and Fukushima incident. In a society in which citizens use science and technology, it is important to recognize that science is not something special, and that thinking logically and critically in everyday life is also a scientific attitude. We learned that a sincere narrative from a face-to-face person can inspire trust. The biggest cause of the Fukushima incident was they predicted the danger of the tsunami, but he did. That was a very bad science communication. The Japanese government and electric power company have continued the campaign that nuclear power generation is safe. There was almost no risk communication about it. Now, at this pandemic, the government again do the same thing. So people don't believe what government says. Transparency and disclosure is the only way to restore trust that the government lost. Now, young people and elderly people got that infection, so it is a very serious problem. Young people were told they are not so serious for that COVID-19, so they go out shopping and to the concert. And also elderly people had very low disease literacy, so they went to the karaoke and got a disease. There are few parallels between global pandemic and natural disaster, but there is agreement that risk communication is important.
We have two famous maxims. Disaster strikes when least expected, and it is extremely hard to scare rightly.
Every time a big disaster struck, these two maxims are told about. So we have no choice but to continue to increase disaster literacy for the public.
It was really interesting, Masa. The Philippines has really looked up to Japan in this pandemic, and it's so surprising to hear that you guys are running into difficulties.
We realize that it is difficult to understand what is risk. In Japanese, risk means danger. So when people have the word risk, it must be dangerous. That is one difficulty to promote risk communication in Japan.
The Philippines is not really an English-speaking country. Most of our languages have no direct translation of the term risk. We also see it as danger. So it's very hard to communicate about risky situations without presenting danger and without scaring people.
Philippines is a very multicultural country, but Japan is a very unicultural country. So it is easier to release some information to the old people than Philippines. But natural disasters are getting more severe every year. So we can't anticipate what big the next one is.
Science and science communication can also help save lives by correcting misinformation in an easy to understand way.
We live in an age where anyone can disseminate misinformation to SNS. There is no choice but to continue to hit patiently, and improving public science literacy can immunize against scientific misinformation.
If I could visit Masa in Japan right now, I want to visit these science cafes, sit in on his meetings with scientists. I like to see how science communication is playing out in Japan in terms of popularization, because we do have a lot to learn from Japan.
Unfortunately, now we cannot hold a science cafe, as you know, but now that is our agenda, to set up a good science cafe online. So if we can share such an online science cafe around the world, so please, Ines, I hope you keep in touch.
Yes, I will, Masa.